Title: The Midnight Visitor. The Stranger in the Rain. That night, Karen couldn't sleep. In her lonely house at the edge of town, near the forest, she kept thinking about the strange man who had appeared in her dream for 3 nights in a row. In her dream, someone knocks on the door. She opens it, but no one is there. Then inside her house, she sees footprints, wet footprints. Karen had moved into this house 3 months ago. After her father passed away, she inherited the place and felt forced to come. Because the house was deep in the woods, she rarely had visitors. But that night, everything changed. It was 2:46 a.m. Rain was pouring. That's when she heard the knock. It was calm but firm. Karen sat upright. Her heart was pounding. She grabbed a knife from the kitchen and slowly walked to the door. "Who is it?" she called out. No answer. Only the sound of rain. She carefully opened the door. Someone was standing there. A man, dressed in a long black coat, with a hat pulled low over his face. Water dripped from his shoes. I need help," the man said, his voice calm but shivering. "My car broke down in the forest. Do you have a phone?" Karen hesitated, but he didn't look dangerous. Slowly, she opened the door wider. "Come in. Don't stay out in the rain," she said. But her heart didn't feel at ease. The man stepped in, removing his wet hat. Karen noticed. His eyes were an icy blue, and there was something unreadable in them. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then he said, "Wasn't this house once owned by Richard Bowen?" Karen froze. How do you know that?" "He was my father." The man said nothing. Instead, he slowly pulled out a silver pocket watch and placed it on the table. "Then it seems I've come to the right place." Karen gripped the knife tighter. Who was this man? Why did he know her father's name? And even more chilling, why were there wet footprints behind him, exactly like the ones in her dream? The watch that shouldn't exist. Karen stood still, her fingers tightening around the knife hidden behind the kitchen counter. The silver pocket watch on the table ticked gently, unnaturally loud in the quiet of the room. She leaned forward slightly to look at it. It was old, scratched. The initials RB were engraved on the back. Her father's initials. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "That watch, where did you get it?" The man didn't move. His blue eyes followed her every gesture. "Your father gave it to me. A long time ago." "That's not possible," Karen snapped. "He died 3 years ago." The man didn't blink. "I know. I was there." Something icy crept up Karen's spine. She tried to keep her voice steady. "You said your car broke down. Why were you even near this place?" "I didn't come by accident," he replied, slowly sitting down on the old wooden chair near the fireplace. He looked around the room like it held memories. "This house has a lot of ghosts, doesn't it?" Karen backed up. "Who are you?" The man looked down at the floor. Rain dripped from his coat and formed a small puddle. Then he looked up again, this time with eyes that didn't seem quite human. Not glowing, but deep, endless. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked. Karen's breath caught in her throat. "I met you once," he continued. "You were 6. You were hiding in that closet over there during the fire." Karen's knees nearly gave out. "That fire. No one else survived except me." "I know," he said. There was a silence. A heavy one. Karen's mind was racing. Her father had never spoken of that night in detail. Just that the fire had taken everything. She had blocked out most of what happened. But now this man, this thing, was pulling it all back. "You shouldn't remember that," she whispered. The man slowly stood up. "I need to show you something," he said. Karen took a step back. He reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph. She recognized the faces immediately. Her father, herself as a child, and a man standing behind them. The man in the photo wore the same coat, the same hat, the same blue eyes. But that photo was taken in 1997, before she was even born. Karen's vision blurred. The room swirled. "That can't be. You haven't aged a day." The man gave a sad smile. "That's because I don't age." The lights flickered. "I'm here," he said quietly, "because something is coming, and you're the only one left who can stop it." The forgotten door. Karen stood frozen, her back pressed against the kitchen counter. Her thoughts were racing like a thunderstorm. The photograph trembled in her hand. Too real, too impossible. The man in the picture looked exactly the same as the one standing in front of her now. Same coat, same haunting blue eyes. Same stillness. You're lying, she finally muttered. This is some sick joke. The man didn't react. He placed the photo gently on the wooden table next to the ticking watch. I wish it were, he said, but there's no time for doubt. Something is waking up beneath this house. Karen stared at him. What do you mean, beneath this house? The man slowly stepped toward the fireplace. He knelt and ran his fingers along the floorboards just beneath the stone hearth. Then he tapped twice. A hollow sound echoed from underneath. You lived here as a child. Your memories of this house were buried after the fire, but there was always a door here. A hidden one. Your father built it. Karen didn't know what to believe anymore. But something inside her stirred, a flicker of a memory, a deep rumble beneath the floor, a scream, then darkness. The man stood again, watching her. He tried to seal it, but sealing something old doesn't make it disappear. It waits. It learns. And now it wants out. She shook her head. This is insane. What is it? A spirit? A demon? What are you even talking about? He finally looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally. Like someone who had seen too much. I don't know what to call it. It doesn't have a name in your language. But your father spent his whole life trying to keep it contained. And when he died, he passed the responsibility to me. Karen's voice broke. Why me? I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to be left alone. I know, he said quietly, but that choice is gone now. It's been feeding off the silence, the isolation, and tonight is the first night it can reach the surface again. If you leave this house, it will follow. If you stay, we might have a chance. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from beneath the floorboards. The entire house vibrated slightly. Karen's eyes widened. What was that? The man looked down. It's awake. The awakening below. Karen stumbled backward as another thump echoed under her feet. Louder this time, deeper, as if something ancient was pushing against the foundation of the house. Her heart pounded in her ears. She clutched the counter like it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. The man stepped calmly away from the fireplace and faced her, his coat still dripping onto the floor. It's not fully risen yet, he said, but we don't have long. Karen looked at him with a mix of anger and fear. What do you mean we? You came here without warning. You know things about my family you shouldn't. And now you're telling me there's some thing under my house trying to break out. The man didn't flinch. Would you have believed me if I told you this before it started knocking? She didn't answer. He took a deep breath. My name is Elias. I was your father's friend long before you were born. He and I were part of something. An order that dealt with forces the rest of the world pretended didn't exist. We called ourselves the Wardens. Karen stared at him. That sounded like something from a book. It was real, Elias replied. And your father was one of the strongest among us. He built this house around the door, not for comfort, but for protection. It wasn't meant to be inherited. But when he died, the house chose you. Karen stepped closer, eyes wide. The house chose me? There's more to this place than walls and nails, he said. Your bloodline matters. The thing below, it remembers you. It remembers the fire. It's been waiting for you to return. Another crash from beneath. This time, the floor cracked slightly near the fireplace. A faint hiss, like air escaping from a deep wound, slithered out. Karen gasped. What's down there? Elias lowered his voice. An echo of something that should have stayed buried. It doesn't have a body. It's made of memory, rage, and hunger. It binds itself to pain, to fear, and if it finds form again. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Karen turned her eyes back to the fireplace, now visibly shifting. The floorboards around it were creaking, warping. I don't know how to fight something like that, she whispered. Elias pulled something from his coat, an old journal, wrapped in cracked leather. Your father wrote this before he died. Instructions, rituals, warnings, everything he knew. Karen took it with shaking hands. On the cover, etched faintly into the leather, were the same initials she had seen on the pocket watch. RB. You were never supposed to be alone in this, Elias said softly. But if you run now, everyone else in this town will pay the price. Another hiss, louder now. A smell rose from the floor, sulfur and ash. Karen opened the journal. The first page had only one line, written in her father's sharp handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I failed. But you don't have to. She looked up at Elias. What do we have to do? He met her gaze. We open the door before it does. Beneath the hearth. The moment Karen whispered, "Let's do it," Elias nodded. There was no time to waste. The thudding beneath the floor was no longer spaced apart. It was steady now, rhythmic, like a heartbeat pulsing through the wood. Karen placed the journal on the table and knelt beside Elias as he pried open a cracked floorboard under the fireplace. The wood groaned, resisting, as though it knew what lay beneath should not be disturbed. But with one final pull, a hidden latch revealed itself, rusted, circular, and cold to the touch. "Hold the journal," Elias said, "and don't let go of it, no matter what you see down there." Karen gritted her teeth and nodded. Elias turned the latch. With a slow creak that seemed to echo into another world, the floor beneath the hearth opened, revealing a dark passageway descending into stone. The air that drifted up was frigid and foul, like the breath of a decaying corpse. Karen nearly gagged. They descended the narrow stairs. Stone walls, moist and lined with forgotten markings, wrapped around them like a coffin. The only light came from strange, pale glow leaking up from the chamber below. Not natural, not electric. It pulsed faintly, almost as if it were alive. "Your father sealed this place after the fire," Elias whispered. "But sealing doesn't destroy what's buried. It only delays it." Karen ran her fingers along the stone as they walked. Carvings lined the walls. Eyes without faces, spirals sinking inward, hands reaching up from beneath the earth. It was art, but it felt more like warning. At the bottom of the stairs, they emerged into a wide, underground chamber. A massive stone door stood at the far end, wrapped in blackened chains, with symbols scorched into the rock. In the center of the floor lay a circular seal, half faded but still faintly glowing. Elias stepped onto the edge of the seal. "This is the lock. Your father and I used it to keep the thing from rising. But the seal weakens when the bloodline is broken. That's why it started calling to you. You're the key, Karen." Karen stared at the stone door. Behind it, something shifted, something listened. She could feel it, deep in her bones, like gravity had suddenly turned sideways. The journal in her hand burned faintly warm. She opened to the next page. "Speak these words to restore the seal," it said, followed by a phrase in a language she didn't recognize. "I can't read this," she whispered. "I can," Elias said. He took the journal and stood in the center of the seal. As he began to chant, the air around them grew heavier, like it was thickening with pressure. The chains on the stone door began to twitch. Then the room screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was inside their minds, raw, ancient anguish that clawed at memory, twisting fear into something sharper. Karen dropped to her knees, clutching her head. "Keep reading," she cried. "Don't stop." Elias raised his voice, shouting the incantation with fire in his chest. The seal beneath them flared bright blue, then purple, then white. And then the door cracked. Not wide, not fully, just a sliver. But through it, something looked at them. Karen turned cold. Whatever stared back had no eyes, no face, only presence. Like a scream without sound, a soul without body. Suddenly, Elias's voice cut off. Blood trickled from his nose. "It's pushing back. It's stronger than before." Karen looked down at the journal. The next line shimmered into view as if newly written. "Only the blood can finish the seal." She froze. Her hands trembled. "What does that mean?" Elias looked up at her, eyes full of dread. "It means you have to bleed. The blood that binds." Karen stared at Elias, her breath catching in her throat. The pulsing light beneath the seal now flickered erratically, struggling against the force behind the stone door. The whisper of something ancient crept through the cracked doorway, like smoke curling through a keyhole. It was searching for a body, a shape, anything it could inhabit. "It means I have to bleed," Karen repeated, her voice distant. Elias wiped the blood from his nose and stepped toward her. "It won't take much. Just a drop. Just enough for the seal to recognize you." "And what if it recognizes me and wants more?" He didn't answer. Karen gripped the hilt of the small ritual knife Elias had pulled from his coat pocket. Its blade was oddly shaped, dull silver, etched with symbols similar to those glowing beneath their feet. She took a step forward, the sound of her boots echoing through the cold chamber. The pressure in the room thickened. The cracked door groaned again, this time a moan, as though the thing behind it was waking up from centuries of sleep. Karen pressed the blade lightly against her palm. "Wait," Elias said. "Before you do it, once your blood hits the seal, it might show you things. Memories. Or lies. It'll try to break you. You have to hold on to what's real." She nodded once. The knife sliced cleanly through her skin, not deep, but enough. Enough to let a droplet of her blood fall from her palm onto the center of the glowing seal. The effect was immediate. The seal flared white-hot, so bright it blinded them. Karen staggered backward, vision exploding into light. Then suddenly, she was no longer in the chamber. She was standing in the living room upstairs. But everything was wrong. The walls were covered in black vines, pulsing as if they were veins. The fireplace was burning, but the flames were black. And in the center of the room stood her father. Not as she remembered him. His face was twisted. Hollow. His voice echoed unnaturally when he spoke. "You left me here to die, Karen." She stepped back. "This isn't real. You're not real. You could have saved me." The figure took a step toward her. "But you forgot me. You forgot everything." Suddenly, a second voice, her own, younger, came from behind her. "You told me to hide, Daddy. I hid, and then you never came." Karen turned to see a younger version of herself, no older than 6, standing in the closet doorway with tears in her eyes. Karen's knees weakened. No, this isn't how it happened." The black vines crept toward her ankles. Her father's distorted face melted away into shadow. She closed her eyes, fists clenched. "This is not real," she growled. And just like that, the illusion shattered. She was back in the underground chamber, gasping for air. The glowing seal now pulsed steadily beneath her, and the stone door was slowly resealing itself. The chains rattled violently, but held. Elias caught her as she stumbled. "You did it," he whispered. But then, crack! A single link in the chain burst. The crack in the door widened just an inch. A sliver of black smoke oozed through. Elias's eyes widened in horror. No, it's not done. The blood wasn't enough. He turned to the journal again, flipping pages frantically. Then he froze. "What is it?" Karen asked, her voice shaking. He looked up, face pale. "It wasn't just your blood the seal needed," he said. "It needed the last blood of the warden line." Karen's heart dropped. "What are you saying?" Elias's eyes filled with sorrow. "I wasn't just your father's friend. I'm his brother. Bloodlines and burdens." Karen stumbled back from Elias, the words he had just spoken crashing into her like a wave of ice water. "Your father was my brother," he repeated, quieter now. "That makes me the last full-blooded warden, which means if this seal is to hold, it needs my blood too." The air in the chamber had changed. The black smoke that had seeped through the broken chain was now circling low around the seal like a hungry mist, whispering in a tongue that made Karen's skin crawl. It didn't just leak, it reached. For her. For Elias. For anything it could bind to. "But you never told me," Karen said, her voice cracking. "You never told me I had an uncle." "Why?" Elias turned toward the broken door. His expression weighed with a sadness she hadn't seen before. A sadness carved deep, like something he'd been carrying for decades. "Because I thought I could carry this burden alone," he said. "Your father wanted to keep you away from this world. He hoped the line would end with him. But fate doesn't care about hope. Bloodlines don't die, they echo." He held up his hand, where veins pulsed darker than they should. "It's been calling me for years, Karen, and I've been running. But tonight it stops." "No," she said, stepping in front of him. "There has to be another way. We can find something in the journal, or get help, or—" "There is no time," Elias said, voice firm but calm. "If this door opens fully, it won't just take this house. It won't stop with this forest, this town. That thing doesn't want to live here. It wants to replace here." Behind them, the second chain gave way. It snapped like a scream, and a wave of cold air rushed through the chamber. The glow from the seal began to flicker again, not weakly, but angrily, as if it too understood what was coming. Elias handed Karen the journal. "If you ever leave this place," he said, "burn it. Let no one ever open this door again." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "Don't do this." "I have to." He took the ritual blade from her, kissed its edge like a promise, then walked calmly to the center of the seal. He looked back once, his eyes not filled with fear, but peace. "Tell them," he said, "that your family stood between the darkness and the world and held the line." Then, without hesitation, he drove the blade into his chest. The reaction was immediate. The seal exploded in a blinding light that lifted Elias's body into the air, his blood raining down in radiant streams. The black smoke shrieked, twisting and fighting as it was pulled back into the sliver of the door. The broken chains re-wove themselves, metal stitching shut with glowing heat. The crack closed, and the stone door sealed. The screaming stopped. Karen collapsed to her knees, the journal clutched against her chest, her face soaked with tears and sweat and silence. The chamber grew still. Elias's body gently lowered to the ground, his eyes closed, his expression peaceful. The ritual knife lay beside him, darkened and still. And for the first time in generations, the darkness beneath the house was quiet. Something left behind. It was hours before Karen could bring herself to move. The silence in the chamber was not peaceful. It was hollow, like something had been torn from the earth and stitched back in uneven layers. The only sound was the occasional crackle of the cooling seal beneath her, its once blinding light now pulsing faintly in a slow rhythm, like the heartbeat of a resting giant. She crawled over to Elias's body. His face, despite everything, looked calm. No fear, no pain, just stillness. Karen reached out and closed his eyes. "I didn't even know I had an uncle," she whispered, her voice shaking. "And I already miss you." She sat in the cold dirt for what felt like another hour before she rose, legs trembling, and gripped the journal tighter in her bloodied hands. She walked slowly up the stone staircase toward the broken hearth above. As she emerged back into the house, morning light was breaking through the trees, pale and cold. The storm had passed. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet leaves and quiet endings. But the house no longer felt like home. Karen sat down at the kitchen table, numb, her clothes stained, her hands trembling. She looked around. The floorboards still creaked beneath her, but not with menace now. Only memory. She opened the journal to the last page. A note had appeared, one that wasn't there before. "If the seal holds, the door sleeps." But never fully. Every generation, one must watch, and one must remember. Karen closed the journal slowly. She stood and walked outside barefoot, feeling the damp earth beneath her toes. The forest was quiet, still, peaceful. But then she noticed something odd. Near the edge of the woods, where the trees thickened, there were footprints in the mud. Small ones, like those of a child. Karen froze. She followed them cautiously, her breath catching. They stopped at the base of an old oak tree, and there, wedged between the roots, was a doll. It was waterlogged, torn, its eyes missing. She reached down and picked it up. On its fabric chest was embroidered a single letter, K. Her childhood doll, but she hadn't seen it since the night of the fire. She felt it in her bones. Something had followed her back. Not the full horror, not the entity, but a piece, a memory, a seed. The woods rustled behind her, though no wind blew. Karen turned slowly. Nothing. But in that nothing she felt watched. The whisper in the walls. Karen stood beneath the oak tree, doll in hand, her breath misting in the cool morning air. The forest around her was too quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, just absent. As if the world were holding its breath. She clutched the doll tighter, her fingers brushing the stitched K, still damp from the mud. "I didn't bring you out here," she whispered to the doll. "You burned in that fire. I saw it. And yet, here it was." A gust of wind swept through the trees, stirring the leaves. For a moment, she thought she heard a child's laugh, distant, faint, like it was being carried through a tunnel. She turned sharply. Nothing but trees. But Karen knew better now. Nothing was off in the skin something else wore. She returned to the house, the weight of the journal and the doll, making her steps feel heavier. As she stepped inside, the familiar warmth of her kitchen was gone. Not cold, but unfamiliar, as though the house itself was struggling to remember what it had been before the chamber below had opened. She placed the doll on the counter and opened the journal again. The page with her father's final message had changed. The ink was still fresh, as if someone had just finished writing. It would try again, in shadow, in memory, in the cracks between dreams. Karen slammed the book shut, heart racing. A soft knock echoed from the front door. Her breath caught. Not again. She crept toward it, slow, cautious. Looked through the peephole. Nothing. But something had been left on the doorstep. A piece of parchment, rolled tight and sealed with wax. She stepped outside, picked it up, and broke the seal. Inside, in delicate, handwritten letters. Warden line confirmed. Surveillance reinstated. You are not alone. No signature. No symbol. Just that message. Karen's stomach turned. Surveillance? From who? The wardens? She thought they were gone. Was there a hidden network? Others still watching the cracks in the world? She walked back inside and turned on the old radio her father used to keep in the kitchen. It hadn't worked in years, but now it flickered to life. Static, then a whisper. Karen. Her blood froze. She turned the dial. The voice was gone. Only silence. Then, knock, knock, knock. Not from the front door. This time, it came from inside the walls. Shadows that remember. Karen's skin turned to ice. The knocks had not come from outside. Not from in drywall. Gently rapping to be remembered. Knock, knock, knock. She backed away from the kitchen slowly, her eyes scanning every corner of the room. The doll still sat on the counter, its head slightly tilted now, though she was certain she had placed it upright. Her voice was a whisper. Who's there? Silence. Then, the radio clicked again, static flaring, followed by the same faint voice. Karen, remember? She ripped the plug from the wall, but the radio stayed on. The voice was not coming through airwaves. It was coming from somewhere deeper, somewhere beneath or behind the fabric of her home or her own mind. She forced herself to move, to think. The journal, the doll, the message. The seal was closed, but not perfect. Elias had said it. Sealing something doesn't destroy it. It waits. It adapts. And now, it had found a new way to reach her. Karen opened the journal again and flipped to the last pages, hoping for anything that might make sense of what was happening. Her eyes locked on a small symbol that had begun to glow faintly along the edge of the binding. A hand, drawn in charcoal ink, with an eye in the center of its palm. It hadn't been there before. Underneath it, a single line appeared, pulsing with ink. The first crack begins in memory. Do not forget what was sealed. Her mind spun. It's not attacking, she muttered. It's reminding. But why? She took the doll into her hands again. Waterlogged, torn, but not rotten. It had been preserved. Kept. Like someone or something had been waiting to give it back. She turned it over. Something was stitched inside the hem. A folded piece of paper, damp but legible. In a child's handwriting. I'm still here. You left me. Karen's knees buckled. She suddenly remembered something, or someone. During the fire, there had been another child. Not just her. She had been told she was an only child. But she remembered it now. The screams weren't hers alone. The closet she hid in had been shared. Another small body. Another voice whispering beside her in the dark. Stay quiet, they won't find us. Karen dropped the doll. She had a sister, and she left her behind. Knock, knock. This time, the sound came from the hallway. Karen turned. The lights flickered, and at the far end of the corridor, just outside the door to her old childhood bedroom, stood a figure. Small, barefoot, soaked in shadow. The little girl didn't move. Her hair was matted. Her eyes black, empty, but her mouth opened. And in a voice not quite human, not quite child, she whispered, You forgot me. The sister behind the door. Karen couldn't move. The little girl at the end of the hall didn't blink, didn't breathe. She just stood there in the faint flickering light, barefoot, drenched, her thin dress clinging to her like she'd climbed out of a graveyard river. Her eyes, two empty wells, locked on Karen with a stare that wasn't angry or sad. It was hungry. You forgot me. The words echoed, not just in the hallway, but inside Karen's head, like they'd been waiting there for years. I didn't, Karen choked. I didn't know. I didn't remember. The little girl tilted her head slowly, and the walls behind her pulsed, faintly, as if they were breathing. You left me, the girl said again, more softly now, more broken. You shut the door. You hid. You covered your ears. Karen's breath came in sharp, trembling gasps. Suddenly, she remembered the closet. She remembered the door slamming shut, the smoke pouring through the cracks, and a little hand squeezing hers so tightly it left a mark. The fire hadn't been the only thing in that house. Something else had been there that night, moving through the rooms, whispering into walls. And she remembered something worse, letting go of that hand. Not by accident. She let go to save herself. Karen dropped to her knees. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears pouring down her cheeks. I was just a kid. I didn't know what I was doing. I was scared. The lights went out completely. Darkness. Then, a voice, right next to her ear. You should be scared now. Karen turned with a scream, swinging blindly, but there was nothing behind her. She staggered her feet, heart pounding. The hallway was empty again. The girl was gone. But the door to her childhood bedroom, the one that hadn't opened in years, was now ajar. Inside, something breathed. Karen approached slowly, every instinct telling her to run. But she had run before. She would not run again. She pushed the door open fully. The room was untouched, preserved, like someone had tried to keep it exactly the way it was the night of the fire. Toys were scattered across the floor. Two small beds sat side by side, hers and one she no longer remembered.